Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a woman you genuinely liked? A woman you felt a real connection with and thought to yourself, that went well? I was kind, I was attentive, I did everything right, and then, within a few days, maybe a week, things just cooled off? She became a little harder to reach. The warmth that was there seemed to fade quietly, like a candle going out in a room you weren't watching. And the painful part wasn't just that she pulled back. The painful part was that you had no idea why. You weren't rude. You weren't cold. You were the opposite: open, generous, fully present. You gave her your attention, your time, your genuine interest, and yet, somehow, all of that effort seemed to push things in the wrong direction. If that has happened to you even once, then what I am about to share with you in this video may be one of the most important things you hear this year. Because the reason this happens has almost nothing to do with your age, your appearance, your income, or anything external at all. It has everything to do with a quiet psychological dynamic that most men were never taught to understand. And once you see it clearly, once you truly understand what is actually happening beneath the surface in those early moments of connection, everything changes. Not because you become someone different, but because you finally start showing who you already are in a way that actually lands. So, stay with me. Let's talk about this honestly, man to man. Here is something that most relationship advice completely misses, especially for men in their 50s and 60s. At this stage of life, you are not the nervous 25-year-old trying to impress someone with a rehearsed line. You have lived, you have built things, you have survived losses that would have broken a younger version of yourself. You have learned patience, perspective, and what actually matters in life. And yet, and this is the crucial part, many mature, emotionally intelligent men still fall into a pattern that quietly undermines everything. It is the pattern of trying too hard, too soon. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is not about playing games. It is not about pretending you don't care or acting distant to seem mysterious. That kind of manipulation belongs to a much younger, much less self-aware version of dating, and it has no place in the kind of authentic connection you are looking for at this point in your life. This is something deeper and more subtle. Think about a man, let's call him David. David is 62. He is thoughtful, financially stable, genuinely kind, and has a good sense of humor. He meets a woman at a social event through mutual friends. The conversation flows easily. There is real warmth between them. He asks for her number, she gives it willingly, and he leaves the evening feeling genuinely hopeful. And then something shifts inside him. That hope, that excitement begins to drive his behavior in ways he doesn't fully notice. He texts the next morning, then again that afternoon when she doesn't reply quickly. He thinks of something funny and sends it. He asks if she is free this weekend. He tells her she has a beautiful smile in the second message he ever sent her. Every single one of those actions came from a good place, from genuine enthusiasm, from a man who had perhaps been lonely for a while and finally felt something real. But from her perspective, something entirely different was happening. Within 72 hours, she already knew exactly how he felt, exactly how available he was, and exactly how much power she held in this interaction. Not because David was weak, but because David left nothing for her imagination to work with. And the human mind, particularly in those early, delicate stages of attraction, is profoundly motivated by curiosity. When curiosity disappears, interest often follows. There is a concept in relationship psychology that I want you to understand deeply because it explains so much of what happens in early attraction. Psychologists sometimes call it emotional gravity, the natural pull that develops between two people when both of them feel a sense of investment, uncertainty, and genuine discovery. Think about the last time you read a book you truly couldn't put down. Was it because you already knew how it ended? Of course not. You kept reading because you didn't know, because the next chapter held something you hadn't figured out yet, because your mind was engaged, curious, and just uncertain enough to stay completely present. Human attraction works in a remarkably similar way. When a man reveals everything, his full emotional availability, his complete interest, his total schedule within the first few interactions, he essentially hands the other person the last chapter of the book before they've had a chance to enjoy the story, and the story loses its power. Now, I am not suggesting you hide who you are or play coy about your feelings. That kind of artificial mystery is exhausting and dishonest, and it attracts the wrong kind of dynamic entirely. What I am talking about is something far more natural, and far more powerful. It is the quiet confidence of a man who is genuinely interested, but not desperate. A man who enjoys the conversation, but also has things to get back to. A man who gives his full presence in a moment, but whose life does not pause and wait for a reply. That kind of man creates gravity without even trying, because the message he sends without words is, I am choosing to be here, and I have things worth choosing from. That is not manipulation, that is emotional maturity, and it is extraordinarily attractive, at any age, but particularly to a woman who is herself mature and has had enough experience to recognize the difference between genuine confidence and performance. Here is a paradox that takes most men by surprise. The man who gives a woman the least amount of his attention does not win, but neither does the man who gives the most. The man who wins, who creates a lasting impression, who stays in her thoughts, is the man whose attention feels earned, deliberate, and real. Let me give you a specific example of how this plays out. Imagine two men who both meet the same woman at a dinner party. Both are pleasant, both are successful, both are genuinely interested. The first man, let's call him Robert, spends most of the evening close to her. He laughs at everything she says. He refills her glass before she asks. He gives her 3 or 4 compliments over the course of the evening. He makes sure she knows he is available and interested. By the end of the night, she has a clear and complete picture of exactly how Robert feels. The second man, let's call him James, has a warm conversation with her for about 20 minutes. He is fully present. He asks her one genuinely thoughtful question, not about her job or where she is from, but about something she mentioned in passing that revealed something real about her character. Then he excuses himself naturally to speak with someone else. He doesn't ignore her for the rest of the evening, but he doesn't hover either. When she goes home that night, which man is she thinking about? Almost certainly James. Not because James played a game, not because Robert did anything wrong as a human being, but because James's behavior communicated something that Robert's didn't. James communicated that his attention was selective, that he was present by choice, not by need, that there was more to discover. And that is the paradox of attention. When it is given thoughtfully and sparingly in the beginning, it carries enormous weight. When it is given constantly and without restraint, it loses its meaning almost immediately. For men in their 50s and 60s, this is particularly important to understand, because at this stage you are not just dating. You are offering someone a share of a life that is already full, already meaningful, already moving in a purposeful direction. That is your greatest asset. Never minimize it by acting like you have nothing else going on. Here is something that women with emotional experience understand intuitively, something they rarely say out loud, but feel clearly in their bones. They are not just responding to what you say, or even what you do. They are reading the emotional story underneath your behavior. Every action you take in those early interactions tells a story about your relationship with yourself. When a man over-explains his choices, the story reads, I need you to approve of me. When a man texts twice before receiving a reply, the story reads, your attention is the thing holding my day together. When a man agrees with everything a woman says to avoid any friction, the story reads, I am more afraid of losing you than I am committed to being honest. None of these things are said aloud. None of them are intentional, but they are communicated clearly, and they create a subconscious impression that quietly works against the connection you are trying to build. Now here is what the opposite looks like. And again, this has nothing to do with being cold or withholding. When a man pauses before responding, genuinely thinking about what was just said, the story reads, I take this seriously, I am not performing. When a man respectfully disagrees with something she says, calmly and without drama, the story reads, I have my own perspective, and I trust it enough to share it. When a man mentions, naturally and without arrogance, that he has plans later this week, a project he is working on, friends he is seeing, a commitment he is honored to keep, the story reads, my life has texture and direction. You would be entering something real. These are not techniques. They are the natural expressions of a man who has done the internal work, a man who genuinely likes himself, a man who brings something to the table because he has actually been building something at that table for years. And that kind of man, grounded, purposeful, calm, is genuinely rare. Which is exactly why he stands out. I want to talk for a moment about pacing, because this is where many mature men, even those who understand everything we have discussed so far, can still stumble. There is a natural rhythm to how genuine emotional connection grows between two people. It is not a straight line upward. It is more like breathing. Moments of closeness, followed by space. Depth, followed by lightness. Revelation, followed by mystery. When you try to accelerate that rhythm, when you push for emotional depth before it has had time to develop naturally, you don't build closeness faster. You actually collapse the very structure that closeness needs to grow within. Think of it like building a fire. You don't start with the largest log. You start with something small, something that catches easily. You give it air. You let it breathe. You add to it gradually, carefully, at the right moments. And what you end up with is something that burns steadily for hours. Rush it, pile everything on too fast, and you either smother it or burn through it in minutes. Emotionally, this means being willing to let conversations end before you have said everything you want to say. It means being comfortable with a day passing without contact, knowing that the space itself is doing something valuable. It means being present and warm when you are together genuinely, fully present, and then letting her carry that feeling with her when you part. Anticipation, handled well, is one of the most powerful forces in human connection, and at your stage of life, you have something extraordinary to offer that younger men simply cannot: the patience and maturity to let something good develop at its own proper pace without rushing it to satisfy your anxiety. That patience is not weakness, it is wisdom, and it is felt. There is also a deeper layer to this that most men never think about, and it has to do with how you carry yourself. Not just with her, but with everyone around you. Our minds are constantly watching how other people respond to someone before we form our own opinion. This happens below the level of conscious thought. It is wired into us, and it plays a significant role in early attraction. When a woman watches a man move through a room genuinely at ease, warmly engaging different people, clearly comfortable in his own skin, without needing to perform for anyone, she registers something about him that no amount of direct charm could produce. She sees that his confidence is not situational. It does not depend on her approval. It exists independently of this moment, this conversation, this evening. That observation lands quietly, but powerfully. Many men make the mistake of narrowing their entire focus the moment they meet someone they like. They stop engaging with the room. They stop being themselves in the full sense. They become so concentrated on making one impression that they inadvertently make a smaller one. The man who stays expansive, who greets his friends with genuine warmth, who is kind to the waiter without thinking about it, who laughs easily and listens fully with multiple people, that man tells a far more compelling story than any carefully crafted introduction could. And she sees all of it, even when she appears not to be watching. Now let's talk about silence, because this may be the most underestimated tool a mature man has in his possession. We live in a world that has become deeply uncomfortable with quiet. People fill every pause with words, with checking their phones, with something, anything, to avoid sitting still with another person in a moment that hasn't been defined yet. But a man who can sit comfortably in silence, who doesn't feel compelled to fill every gap in the conversation, who can listen without already preparing his response, that man communicates something profound without saying a single word. He communicates that he is enough, that this moment is enough, that he doesn't need noise to feel okay about himself. In practical terms, this means resisting the urge to jump in when she is still thinking. It means letting a meaningful thing she said actually land before you respond to it. It means being willing to end a conversation at a natural high point rather than stretching it past its most powerful moment. After a particularly good evening together, you don't need to text for 3 hours to extend the feeling. Let her sit with it. Let that warmth be the last thing in her mind before she sleeps. That quiet space does more work than another hour of messaging ever could. Silence, used with intention and ease, is the language of a man who is completely at home in himself. And there is nothing more grounding to be around than that. I want to close with what I believe is the single most important insight in this entire conversation. Everything we have talked about, the attention paradox, the emotional gravity, the rhythm of connection, the stories your behavior tells, all of it flows from one central truth. The most attractive thing about a man in his 50s or 60s is not his bank account. It is not his physical appearance. It is not his clever conversation. It is the undeniable sense that he has built a life worth living, and that he is still building it. A man who wakes up with purpose, who has friendships he maintains, interests he pursues, goals he is working toward, values he actually lives by. That man carries an energy that cannot be faked and cannot be ignored. He does not need a relationship to give his life meaning, because his life already has meaning. And that means that when he chooses to bring someone into that life, the choice carries real weight. It is a genuine gift, not a transaction, not a desperate plea for companionship dressed up as romance. It is an invitation. Come and see what I have been building. Come and be part of something that is already good. That is the energy that draws people in and keeps them there. Not clever lines, not strategic texts, not performing a version of yourself designed to impress. Just the quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who knows his own worth, not arrogantly, not loudly, but in the calm, steady way that only comes from a life genuinely and honestly lived. So let me bring this together for you simply and clearly. If you have been feeling frustrated, if you have been doing everything you thought you were supposed to do, and still watching connections fade before they really begin, I want you to hear this. The answer is not to try harder. The answer is to come back to yourself. Come back to your life, your purpose, your sense of direction. Let your attention mean something again by being thoughtful about where you place it. Let your words carry weight again by not using more of them than necessary. Let the natural rhythm of connection breathe, rather than forcing it to move at the pace of your anxiety. And above all, remember this. You are not at the beginning of your story trying to prove you are someone worth knowing. You are deep into a remarkable story, with chapters already written that most people would be honored to read. The right woman won't need you to perform for her. She will need you to simply and honestly show up as who you already are. And that, for a man who has done the work of truly knowing himself, is more than enough. If this video gave you something real to think about, something that actually landed, I would genuinely love for you to subscribe to this channel. I put out new videos every week, specifically for men in this stage of life. Men who take relationships seriously and want real psychological insight, not hollow advice. And if you have a friend going through something like this, share this video with him. Because sometimes, the most valuable thing we can do for the men we respect is point them toward a conversation that might change everything. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.